All right. So yes, indeed, he judged them with plagues. He executed a judgment upon them. Now, at every step of the way, did Egypt have a choice?
Yes.
They had a choice to make every step of the way, right? It was let my people go. They have a choice to let God's people go. Yes.
Even when God says, I'm going to harden their hearts, I'm going to harden his heart, he just put him in a situation where he knew what choice he was going to make, but he didn't make him make that choice.
Yes. That's the key that we'll look at in a later lesson, is that God is not forcing someone to make a particular choice just because he knows what choice they will make. The timelessness of God is something we will never be able to truly comprehend. How do you comprehend that? Our whole existence is based upon time. So we can't truly comprehend all that's involved here. However, we can accept it. We can accept that God knows the choices that we're going to make. He can calculate the minutia that we can't calculate. God knows, even though we still have free choice. So he tells them in verse 14, I'm going to judge that nation, but he also says afterward they shall come out with great substance. What is the significance of that in that story? Yes.
Well, Israel's still going to be blessed.
Israel's still going to be blessed. Now, that is looked at as spoils of the war. It is looked at also as their proper earnings for what work they did. So sometimes we get really mixed up when we look at servitude and slavery in the Bible. And sometimes we equate it and say, well, God is okay with it. Well, God said they were going to be entreated very, very severely. But he also judged the nation that did so, didn't he? And does it sound like God is okay with it? That this nation made them serve and treated them bitterly and unfairly. Does it sound like God is okay with that? Yes.
I mean, we should know better. God is love. God wants us to treat each other nicely. There's no way you can turn to slavery in almost any capacity and say that's loving towards each other. We should know it's not something that's okay.
Indeed. Indeed. And so he tells them in prophecy, it hasn't happened yet, that this was going to be the case. This is going to happen, and I'm going to judge them. They're going to come out with great substance, all ahead of time. So for us to twist this around doesn't make any sense. God is pretty clear on what's going to happen. And he says, and thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace. Thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation there shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. So when he tells them this whole prophecy of what's going to happen, the question then is, how does God execute on this whole prophecy? How does he make it all happen? So turn to Acts chapter 7. Acts chapter 7. And we see the story there with Stephen that Stephen tells is an encapsulated story.
What verse?
Oh, yeah, I'll get there. It's an encapsulated story of the history of Israel. It's a good place to go if you just want to summarize the story. And we're going to begin right at the beginning. Then said the high priest, are these things so? And he said, men, brethren, and fathers, hearken, the God of glory appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia before he dwelt in Charan, and said unto him, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and come into the land which I will show thee. That was our first verses that we looked at. Then came he out of the land of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Charan, and from thence, when his father was dead, he removed him into the land wherein ye now dwell. And he gave him none inheritance in it, no, not so much as to set his foot on it. Yet he promised that he would give it to him for a possession, and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child. And God spake on this wise, that this seed should sojourn in a strange land, and that they should bring them into bondage and entreat them evil 400 years. So we see a repetition of the prophecy there that he had told Abraham. And the nation to whom they shall be in bondage will I judge, said God. And after that they shall they come forth and serve me in this place. In verse 8, and he gave him the covenant of circumcision, and Abraham begat Isaac and circumcised him the 8th day, and Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat the 12 patriarchs. And the patriarchs, moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt, but God was with him. So now we see these descendants happen. We see them moving and making choices. And God says they moved with envy and sold Joseph into Egypt, but God was with him. So the implication is God is directing Joseph's footsteps in the sense of protecting him when he says God is with him, right? Because what might have happened to Joseph if God had not been with him? It might have been killed, right? He's making sure that, look, Joseph is going to be protected because there's a role for him to carry out. So everybody still has their own free will. Everyone's still making their choices. They move with envy, they do something evil, but God protects him. That's what we see. So not God forces him to do something good, not forces somebody else to do something evil, but we do see God's hand playing out throughout this whole story. And this story is taking place over a large span of time. People are moving, individuals are moving, and then you can look at it on a national level, right? If you're familiar with statistics and political science, you model things, right? You're not really studying exactly what individuals do, but in order to make those models, what do you have to study? Individual choices, right? What are some individuals doing? You poll them, you find out what people are doing, and you come up with larger statistical models that govern the larger scale. We understand this, right? We understand this on just a political science level. When we see things moving in God's word, sometimes we just look at the big picture and forget the individuals. Sometimes we're just looking at the individuals and forget the big picture, but they're all interconnected. That's what we're looking at today. God's providence is not just on the large scale. That large scale is being affected by many, many, many individuals. A lot of things are happening here. Right? Yes.
So basically, you're saying God has his fingers in a lot of pies.
And a lot of pies. God is able to do that. Now, I can't handle one pie, but that's me. That's my own limitation. But that's what's going on. We see him here getting everybody into the proper place that they need to be. Had they not sold Joseph, we know that there's an element to the story that seemingly could not happen. So it almost seems like Joseph has no choice in this whole matter. That's the danger we get into, because that's what it doesn't it feel that way? If Joseph actually had a choice and could have said, I'm choosing to go somewhere else, then it would have disrupted all of God's plan, right? Yes.
I see It almost sounds science fiction when we're talking about these kind of things. Because what you're seeing is God can see the whole timeline at once.
Yes.
He can make the smallest change here and see how it affects a small change here and easily come out with the outcome he wants. And he doesn't have to make people do what he wants. He just changes some small circumstances and sees the effect it has. And when he makes predictions, they're not predictions to him. He's just seeing the future of what's going to happen already.
All right.
So, I mean, to God, this is all very simple.
Yes. Yeah.
Hard
I
for us-
mean, it is, again, because we can't fathom exactly how this works, it becomes very challenging for us. But to God, I mean, again, you describe the nature of God, you can see that this is not going to be a problem. To be omniscient, but to also just be outside of time itself, that it changes everything. And so as the story goes, it says, God was with him. And verse number 10, and delivered him out of all his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he made him governor over Egypt and all his house. So he grows to a prominence, right? Is this because Joseph is just so good?
Might have a little help.
We see God moving in this. So, how do we know that what we accomplish in life is just because we're so good or because God is with us? Yes.
I think this is one of the reasons God doesn't like the haughty, who think they're doing it all themselves. He's very often arranging things, and we should be humble at all times.
We should know our place. I mean, it's good to acknowledge good work. Good work in others, good work in ourselves. When you do good work, you should take note of that, because we spend so much time dealing with bad work that we should acknowledge the good so we keep doing it. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? We should be able to acknowledge the good work that we've done. However, when we start to think that it's all about that's what it's all, it's all about what I did. Good job. Good job. That's when the danger comes in. Again, we talk about our new location, and I pray that it goes the way it seems to be going. There's a lot of things that have fallen into place. A lot of things. I believe God has blessed us. Why? Because we could not have done it. We couldn't have even imagined the things that fell into place. We were hoping for one option for a church building to buy versus a commercial area or industrial, and we had three. We didn't even imagine that. Am I wrong?
No, we didn't think we'd get a church building.
No. So, there's no way we can look back on it, get into our new location, be very happy with our new location, and say, look what we did.
That's dangerous.
Too many things that were completely out of our control. So we're happy about it. I think there were good choices made along the way, and we were involved in those choices, but we're agents allowing God to work through us. If we look at it that way, then I think we're okay. However, if we start looking at it as look at what we've accomplished, watch out. So we see Joseph here clearly getting to a place of prominence, and clearly it's because God is with him, because the Bible explicitly calls it out. I believe this is here so that we can understand God moving with us, even though we may not understand the details of how exactly. We can know that God is doing that because we just see this bigger picture. And so he goes on. Now came a dearth over all the land of Egypt and Canaan, and great afflictions, and our fathers found no sustenance. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Depends on the outcome.
Yes. Traditionally, famine in the land, is that a good thing?
No.
It's not a good thing. We normally look at this as a very bad thing. However, it is through this that God uh, allows his nation to exist, grow, take root, grow, and prosper, right? When ultimately they're going to leave Egypt, and when they leave, they're going to leave with all the materials, all the goods they need in order to build the tabernacle with all of the, the necessary gold and silver and all of that. They're going to leave with that. They're going to leave Egypt with that. Yes.
So talking about the drought, we talk about, well, what is God controlling what's he changing that he's controlling people? And often throughout the Bible, you see him controlling the weather. And that's not somebody's choice. He controls the weather and it makes events happen. Thank
you for calling that out, because he explicitly talks about, I'm going to prevent the rain from coming. I'm going to do, he explicitly shows you and demonstrates that. That's not all God has power over,
No.
But we explicitly see that. And so we get a glimpse into some of the things, because clearly this affected the course of all of history here. Many people are being affected by this famine. In verse 12, now, but when Jacob heard that there was corn in Egypt, he sent out our fathers first, and at the second time, Joseph was made known to his brethren, and Joseph's kindred was made known unto Pharaoh. Then sent Joseph and called his father Jacob to him, and all his kindred, 75 souls. So 75 people come in. And were carried over into Shechem and laid in the sepulchre that Abraham, at verse 15. So Jacob went down into Egypt and died, and he and our fathers. And so he said he laid them in the sepulchre that Abraham bought for a sum of money of the sons of Emor, the father of Shechem. But when the time of the promise drew nigh, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt. So now we get to the point of Moses. We have a time jump. The people are growing. They go into Egypt, some 75 people. They come out a great nation. God has made all of this happen. So looking at the fulfillment through Moses, in Exodus 3, verses 7 through 10. Exodus 3.
Weather and burning bushes.
Yes. Really, at Exodus 1, now these are the names of the children of Israel which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already, and Joseph died, and all his brethren and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. All of this through the hand of God guiding them. That's the providence that we see, individual as well as great. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. What I want to point out here is that is a very significant point of inflection. What happens? What's going on here? Well, there's a king that knows Joseph, and it allows him to prosper, right? But what happens when there's a king that doesn't know Joseph? What changes? Yes.
Things went south.
Things went south, or seemingly that's the way we look at it, right? But because of all of that, because of that, he entreats them bitterly. He subjects them to great strains, great pains, right? What does that do to Israel? Yes.
Well, I want to look at it back onto the individual level. This is where we see a bunch of people suffering because of God's plan, because God's plan is many generations. So some people end up suffering, not from God directly, but because of the sequence of events of other people, bad kings, things like that. And we say, how could God do this? But because God sees that, and it's a long plan that's going to come out to end with his son dying for us. So, I mean, it justifies all these things. And I don't like when people blame God for bad things that happen in the world.
No, and indeed, and thank you. We didn't discuss this, but this is perfect because this is what we're discussing. Did they just suffer? What is the result of what's going on here? Now, the inflection point is there arose a king that did not know Joseph. That brings about a bunch of suffering, right? What does he do? He orders that the boys be killed, right? And what do they say about the Israelite, rather, women, the Hebrew women? Yes.
Aren't they the ones that the midwife said they're so fast that they already had their baby one
And they're strong.
and very strong?
They're strong. How did they become so strong?
Probably working.
Through what they suffered. That's how they became strong. So was the suffering a bad thing?
All these things are yeses and no.
And we need to see this. We are going to suffer some things. We're going to go through some things. We're going to get to our new location and we're going to go through some things. Things seem to be going overall well, but we're going to go through some things. We need to endure the suffering. We need to endure the hard times. We need to be strengthened. We need to come out stronger every time we encounter difficult times. From God's perspective, what we might consider these bad things happening to good people and the suffering that goes on, from God's perspective, may not be bad at all. It may simply be to get to a particular end. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because our ultimate end is seeing God in peace, making heaven our home. We know this. That is our ultimate end. So the things that we suffer along the way, God's already told us it's going to happen. So it's not like he's lied to us. We present to other people, you become a Christian, everything will be rosy. We're the ones lying to people. God's not lying to us. Yes.
Well, I'm just gonna say, God doesn't say our road's gonna be smooth all the time. When it gets rough, you just have to put your faith and trust in God.
Indeed.
And that's what gets you through.
Indeed. And oftentimes it makes us stronger for it. We don't like to suffer, and that's okay. Right? That's a normal reaction. If I've got the easy way and it's not wrong, and I've got the hard way, why wouldn't I choose the easy way? Right? How now? On the other hand, we talked about this in relation to looking at sporting events, the Olympics, and the events that were going on during that time. Look, you do not get strengthened. When I did gymnastics when I was in high school, my hands became very, very hard. They became very, very hard, but they were very, very bloody before that. That's just a reality. And so over time and over a lot of pain, they become hardened for the task. That's the reality. Those that do gardening or any sort of garden work know that same thing that will happen. And so if you want to accomplish something, sometimes you'll inflict the suffering on yourself just to become strong enough in order to accomplish the task. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've shared this several times that when I'm talking to God and I say, I prefer this, but obviously your will is done. And ultimately, I say, I want whatever is going to get me to the goal. Not in these words, obviously, but even if it's something I'm not going to like, if that gets me where I need to be, then bring it on.
Indeed. And sometimes that's a hard prayer to make.
It is.
Because with that may come a little bit of fear. What is that? What is that road? What is that path? Can I endure that path? Sometimes it can be a little bit of self-doubt. Now, over time, we become a little bit more exercised, a little bit more experienced with God's plans for us. We've survived more things. And because of that, it becomes a little easier to rely on God. But if we're honest, there's still an element of challenge involved with saying, thy will be done. What if we don't like his will?
It's the best for us.
Are you guaranteed to like it?
No.
No. Let's just be honest. It doesn't do any harm to be honest. It's a good thing. It preps us. It allows us to actually go ahead and get through things. Usually when people lie to you, you just feel betrayed and bitter afterward. God gives us a very true testimony. And so when we pray, God's will be done. Sometimes we might be hesitant, especially if we've got an inkling that we're going to suffer. Then it's sometimes a hard prayer to make. We might say, it shouldn't be, but let's just go on and be honest. Sometimes it is. We make it anyway. And again, we're strengthened and God demonstrates. So,
Yeah. Usually that prayer happens when you see some calamity coming right at you. And you're saying, oh God, please get me out of this. Oh God, please find a way to pray. And you got to stop and think, but if that's what you will for me, then I'll try to endure it. But usually you're trying to get out of that bad situation coming at you,
Yeah. So you pray, God, get me out of this, and you die. Could that happen?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Enoch didn't see the world destroyed. He was translated, he got to go be with God. But he didn't see the world destroyed. That was God's will for him. We don't know what exactly God will do for us, but we do know he'll do the best thing for us. It may not be exactly what we think. So when we get to Exodus chapter 7, God calls Moses from the burning bush and his mission to deliver the Israelites from Egypt. Verse 7, and the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me, and I have also seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians oppress them. Come now therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So he's calling on an individual to deliver the children of Egypt, which now are mighty in number, very numerous, and it's all part of this grand promise that had been made. Yes.
I'm going back a bit, but I'd like to make one more comment about what we were talking about. About sometimes we face these hard things in life. And it makes me think of Naaman coming and being told to dip in the River Jordan 7 times. And his servant told him, if he told you to go do something hard, you would do it. And if our goal is heaven, and God said, I'm going to make you do this and laid it out exactly for us, well, okay, if I have to do that to get to heaven, I'll do it. But in our lives, sometimes we don't realize that that's what's happening to us. We just, we don't even want to dip the 7 times. So it helps to realize that this hard part of life could be the challenge that I need to get to heaven.
Yeah. Many times we're just making challenges for ourselves, dip 7 times. That's what he says. I love that passage because I believe it's what we see around us every day is a lot of people just don't want to do what is evident before them, but will do something really grand. I'm going to make this trek up this mountain to go do this, that, and the other. I will do everything except Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. And we say, well, what about this way? What about this way? There's the way. He says, I'm the way. Why do we need another way? That's the choice we will make, because that's not the way we think of. It's not, maybe it's mundane to us. So we want something grand. We want something great sometimes. Just whatever reason, we kick and scream against the way God would have us to go. And even when we do that, we're still part of God's providence. We're still going to bring about good, evil for those that are around us. We're going to be a part of that plan. Good for those that are obeying God, and not good for those who choose not to. So he calls Moses an individual, and we see this fulfillment of the prophecy. 400 years of prophecy fulfilled. Exodus 12, verses 40 and 41. Now the sojourning of the children of Israel who dwelt in Egypt was 430 years, and it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the selfsame day it came to pass that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. Now, many times when we talk about years, we're not necessarily talking about to the day, but here where it calls it out, even to the day, it was exactly that. No man can control that. 400-year span of time, who is living through that? No one. No one's living at these sort of lifespans at this point in time. Moses lived how long? 120 years. You can divide his life into 40-year segments, right? 40 years he's called, another 40 years before he gets up the courage to realize, yeah, I am exactly who I'm, the one I thought I was and should be carrying this out, and another 40 years before he would die and Israel would go into the promised land subsequently. So he lived 120 years. 120 years is 6 generations. We said this is how many generations? 20 generations. More than 3 times the lifespan of someone like Moses. That's a long, long time. Tell me details about your life 40 years ago, 60 years ago. Give me details.
Do you know your great-great-grandmother's name or your great-great-great-grandmother's name?
Yeah.
Most people don't. That's 5 generations.
This is a lot of time that's going on. And the actual exact same day they came out of Egypt. We've got to see God's hand played through all of that. And when we look at that story in the way that it's presented there and the way that it's told, it is just so epic. I really do wish somebody in Hollywood would just make depiction of the Bible with no embellishments, no, flourish. Why does it need it? I mean, this is a pretty grand story, isn't it? It's pretty interesting to me. I do advise people to read the Bible, not just study the Bible. I advise you to study the Bible, but it's also good to read the Bible. Sometimes when we're studying, we'll put off studying because we're tired, we're fatigued. Sometimes just pick it up and read it. There are very interesting stories in the Bible, and they're true. Why not? Grand story here. He delivers them out of the land of Egypt. So many people are taking part of this, from the king that doesn't know Joseph to Pharaoh that Moses has to interact with, to Pharaoh's wife who is interacting with him. All of these players have a part in this story that direct the grand scale. So we know that God is active in our day-to-day lives, as we've said. We know that through God's providence, things are happening. That's why we said over in Romans 8, all things work together for good to them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. How does that come about? We don't have to know all the details. We do, as children of God, need to believe that God is indeed going to take care of that. He's going to govern it. He's going to make things happen. And we may not see it, but when we see the bigger picture, it's undeniable, right? Isn't it undeniable in this story? We have a story right now that, again, we talk about our building and our new place and the things that have come together for it. That's a story to be told. It's one we better not forget. We want to pass that story on to the subsequent generations of this congregation because it's a good story that lets people know God is indeed good. God is indeed active and operational in our life. He is not some inert God. He's not some inaccessible God, and he's definitely not an irrelevant God. That was my mistake coming up, to think God's existence is completely immaterial to my life because he doesn't matter. Why would he matter? He's not doing anything. We've got a process. We've got a system that's going on. There's a natural course of things. So whether God exists or not, I thought was completely immaterial. I did not know that God was actually active. We need to, as Christians, make sure we don't make the mistake of starting to think and believe that God is inactive. The crossing of the Red Sea, of course, ultimately God's deliverance of Israel. We're just about out of time, so we won't go through that. I did have a few verses for discussion. Proverbs 16:9, Daniel 4:34, 35, and Acts 14:15 through 17, but they're all going to tell you the same thing. God is indeed active. He is indeed directing our footsteps. He is indeed continuing to be an influence in our lives, making sure we get to where we need to be. Ultimately, we're striving to make heaven our home, right?
Yes.
These stories about God's providence, what does that mean? What's the implication to making heaven our home?
Have faith in God.
Have faith in God.
He's looking out for the best for us.
He's looking out for the best for us. Not only that, those are true, and those are elements to the ultimate aspect of this, which is God will make this happen. And that's for me as an individual, for us as a congregation, right? So when I think about myself, I'm thinking about myself ultimately seeing God in peace and making heaven my home, right? That's my pursuit, my individual pursuit. But I also think about the congregation getting to heaven, right? All of this is working together for us to see that greater good. Me individually, and each and every one of you. That's a gratifying thought. When I think of Egypt and how many pies God had his hand in, certainly he can make certain that we all have the opportunity to make heaven our home. That's what Providence is promising us. All right, let's see, okay. What about our other elements today? Today is the sun.
I think Alan had to close the prayer.
Yes, I'll take that.
Number 504, I want to be a worker. So I want to be a worker for the Lord. I want to love and trust His holy word. I want to sing and pray and be busy every day in the kingdom of the Lord. I will work, I will pray in the vineyard of the Lord. I will work, I will pray, I will labor every day in the vineyard of the Lord. I want to be a worker every day. I want to lead the erring in the way that leads to heaven above, where all is peace and love in the kingdom of the Lord. I will work, I will pray in the vineyard of the Lord. I will work, I will pray, I will labor every day in the vineyard of the Lord. I want to be a worker strong and brave. I want to trust in Jesus' power to save. All who will truly come shall find a happy hope in the kingdom of the Lord. I will work, I will pray in the vineyard of the Lord. I will work, I will pray, I will labor every day in the vineyard of the Lord. Number 508, to the work. Work. Know me. To the work, we are servants of God. Let us follow the path that our Master has trod. With the balm of His counsel, the strength to renew, let us do with our might what our hands find to do. Toiling on, toiling on, toiling on, toiling on. Let us hope, let us watch, and labor till the Master comes. To the work, Let the hungry be fed to the fountain of life. Let the weary be led. In the cross and the banner our glory shall be, while we herald the tidings salvation is free. Toiling on, toiling on, toiling on, toiling on. Let us hope, let us watch, and labor till the Master comes. To the work, in the strength of the Lord, and a robe and a crown shall our labor reward. When the home of the faithful our dwelling shall be, and we shout with the ransom, salvation is free. Toiling on, toiling on, toiling on, toiling on. Let us hope, let us watch, and labor till the Master comes. Dion